Look at you, not clearing your throat, not coughing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to After Service, a production of Open Door Community Church in Aurora, Oregon, featuring your pastor, Brian Ricketts.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hey, it's me.
Hi.
And Joe, our amazing worship pastor who can sing as Kermit the Frog and
Hi ho,
Elmer
Kermit the
Fudd.
Frog here. Yep.
Yeah. You were singing worship songs on Sunday before service in those voices, and that's always gets people a good giggle. So, how's your week been?
Good. 3-day weekend. And, I don't know about you, but 3-day weekends do you know what the term scope creep is? Have you heard that before?
No.
So in project management, you have a scope. Like, what are we trying to accomplish?
Okay.
And that scope creep is when you take what you had agreed that you were going to accomplish, and then you add to that. I call Vanessa, my wife, for those of you listening for the first time, the queen of scope creep, because we will plan what we're going to do for a given time period, and then she'll go, well, let's do this too. And it becomes like too much. Now, I say that, and this past weekend, it was my fault. But 3-day weekends tend to be just prepared for you to add more. Instead of being like, oh, I have an extra day to rest. It's I have an extra day
to get stuff done. To
try to get stuff done. And then to finish up the 3-day weekend, more stress and less rested than intended. In this case, on Monday, I decided I was going to replace the flooring in the bathroom, which means pulling the toilet, clearing the old flooring and that stuff, and then laying the flooring and then replacing the toilet. It's not that big a deal. It's just that it's a small room. I'm 6'.
Still,
I'm tall, and I need to get it done before soccer practice. So we finished putting the toilet back into place at like 12:40 with soccer practice starting at 6. No stress. No stress. And I also did one of those things that I'm ashamed of, where I got frustrated, and rather than taking a break, walking away, doing some good breathing or whatever, I took the hammer and just destroyed a piece of flooring. And then I felt shame about that. It's just sitting in a place of dishonor in the garage where I can look at that and go, that's $10 you threw away, or $20.
Oh,
whatever.
Joe, that sounds familiar. Although I haven't done that in a while, but I've certainly done that. Most guys have.
Yeah.
Most people have. Let's not just say guys. A lot of people have.
I would like to give the fair gender an extra credit in that they tend to do a better job of managing their emotions.
I don't know.
There's
Maybe.
always exceptions, but I think generally, I'd be interested to hear
The
what
ones
people
I
think.
know, I don't think so. I think they express it differently so we guys don't see it.
If you give me a rubber mallet, I'm going to beat something up with it.
No, yeah, I don't think they get mad in that way. No, they get mad.
Right.
When they get mad, they get mean.
Right. There's cruelty there.
They get cruel. They get yeah. Their whacks are not physical. It's verbal.
Yes. Do you remember that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Yeah.
Right. That's so not true.
So not true. Sticks and stones may break my bones.
Give me sticks and stones all day long, right?
But words will wound me for generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that isn't it. Okay, this is a complete side note. But there was a period of time where I really was wrestling with the question of, okay, if people were asked, what are the tendencies, the sinful tendencies of men in general? What list the main sins? And it was prompted by a video I saw. No, maybe it was a video or it was a speaker talking about things he does. And when they asked women that question, they list like 3 or 4 things. Boom, no problem. And then they asked, well, what are women's? And they didn't have an answer. So I thought, well, they have to have something. So I started asking the women in my life, well, what sins do women tend to? And they go, the same thing as you. There's no difference. We still struggle with lust. We still struggle with anger. We still struggle with pride and greed and everything else. It's like, oh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
It's just the way that it's expressed is very different. Yeah,
very different.
This is something we could probably explore quite a bit, and we should talk about the message on Sunday and get into that.
Yes.
And so let's hear that elevator speech, sir.
It's hard. Okay, let me be honest about this sermon. I think it was a mess. And it was a mess because the first four verses in Habakkuk chapter 2 are very difficult to translate. There's a lot of debate and different ways of looking at it. And I never was really able to fully get a clear, this is where I'm going with it. I mean, the simple answer of it is straightforward, but there's so many nuances, and I got lost in the weeds in the nuance. But the basic story is, Habakkuk is like, what are you doing with all this sin in the world? I don't get it. I don't understand. So God gives him a vision. And these first chapter 2 is kind of the introduction, the prelude to the vision, which is in chapter 3, and the first couple of verses is God's introduction to the vision, and it just says, "Hey, look, I'm coming back." It's a vision of the end times in which Jesus comes back, and you need to wait for it, even if it seems like it's going to take a long time. Wait for it, and who gets to stand in this day of judgment? It's the righteous, the people who, and here's part of the debate, depending on how you read it, it's either God's faithfulness, or it's your steadfast faith, or it's something along this lines. But the idea is you need to trust that God's going to deal with this, and that's the issue. Trust God. He's going to take care of things.
And that's really big. It kind of builds on what we talked about last week with the podcast.
Yes.
The idea that there is hope in God's justice, that if you have faith that he's going to take care of things, then that's something that you get to kind of set on a shelf, because it's not yours anymore. Easier said than done. Now, this is Habakkuk 2, verses 1 through 4.
Right. 5 through the rest of the chapter is a list of condemnation. It's the reasons for the judgment that's coming. It's all these woes. Woe to this person and that person and that person. But verses 1 through 4 is the key.
Is there a translation that you prefer?
In this case?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
There's a variety of them that have issues. I mean, I like what Hebrews chapter 10 did, because they quote this verse, where's my
Here,
Bible?
I can bring it up.
Hebrews 10. But I want to have my Bible in my hand.
All right.
There we go. So they translate the end of verse 3. Okay, in the New American Standard, it says, "Though it tarries, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay." But Hebrews translates that. The writer of Hebrews translate that as, "Though he tarries, wait for him. He will certainly come. He will not delay." He makes it that it's talking about a person, and I think that's true. I think what's happening in this vision is he's seeing this coming one, which is clearly what we see in chapter 3, and God is saying, though he seems this coming one seems to delay coming, wait for him, he's going to come. And so I agree with that version. Yeah.
Well, to me, that goes back to, I mean, it does very much speak to judgment. The idea that, first of all, though he tarries, is almost a judgmental term that says he's not going to come in your time. It's his time. So it may feel like he's delaying, and maybe he is, and that's to your benefit.
Yep.
And his timing is perfect. And but I think that really it really points very specifically to there's hope in laying down whatever you think you have to carry, whatever you think you have to accomplish, and recognize that you can go ahead and live your life and allow that God to take care of the rest of that stuff.
In the time he's going to take care of it. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And I think that's a lot of what it is. And it's interesting that we're not, and I don't know if it'll be you and I, or it'll be an interview next week, but it's interesting as I just think about this whole book. And it's one of the things this time, because this is not the first time I preach this, but it's just interesting to me to see Habakkuk's tone change from chapter 1 to end of chapter 3. At the beginning, he's confused, he's worked up, he's frustrated, but at the end, and perhaps a little self-righteous, but at the end, he's far more humble, and he's patient. It's that famous verse, though, even though there's no grapes on the vine, I'm gonna trust that it's gonna happen. And he's just transformed by seeing this vision, and it's just an interesting transformation, and it kind of speaks to what you're getting at.
Well, and it reminds me of Jonah, because Jonah never got there, right?
I don't think he did. Yeah,
right. It's almost like they started.
Habakkuk is different, though. He's in a very different place.
Yeah, and I think they both kind of provide a model for us today as Christians. One of the things that I mentioned after your sermon was, we're talking about the hope that comes with that, is it seems like a lot of us are moving through this world as Christians, assuming that it's our job to take care of the judgment piece of things, and not trusting that he's going to take care of it. That we're like, I don't have the patience for God to tarry. I'm going to take care of this.
Right.
And that's a bit of the Jonah piece of that. It's like, I can't believe, God, you're going to let this happen.
Right.
Well, this is bogus, whatever.
Right.
And Habakkuk comes around to like, okay, God, all right. Like Vanessa says, it's above my pay grade. You got
above
it.
our pay grade. Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he ends up saying. This is above my pay grade. And there's a piece to it. And that's kind of what I got at the end of it too, is what if we really embrace this concept of this truth that Jesus as judge is coming back, and he's going to set it right. If there's a way to think about that and present it in a positive light, I think that'd be really helpful, because we always think of it as a negative, but that's part of it, is I don't have to stress out about fixing the world, because Jesus will. It doesn't mean I don't act justly. It doesn't mean I don't do my part to try and make things better, but the weight isn't on my shoulders.
Right. It's to me, it also relates to kind of how the Holy Spirit works in the world, in that we don't have to have the right words or the perfect words. That he's going to take care of that. And, forgive me for this, but, in the counseling world, there's kind of the idea of like, it's not your job to fix somebody.
Right.
You're just nudging them along. And if all you do is move them forward a centimeter, you've moved them forward a centimeter. You don't have to solve everything. So if you trust that the Holy Spirit is going to do his job, then there's a certain freedom that comes there that I wish that we all kind of felt a little bit,
Right. Oh, that gets hard when you're dealing with people, though, isn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is like, where's the kind of the demarcation line between being tolerant of something that we shouldn't tolerate and trusting that God's got it taken care of? At what point is it our job? I don't think there's a clear answer, but I'm just curious.
My thoughts on that. Yeah. Yeah, and in what context are you talking about? Are you talking about just between two people, or are you talking about like in a society?
Well, let's take the interpersonal component of that. Where you see somebody who is acting or actively sinning or something that is offensive to you or whatever. How do we respond to that in a way that provides a nudge without without waiting for God to come in and act? That's not very clearly stated.
Well, my first thought goes to is at Matthew 18. And the right way to think about Matthew 18, which is the thing, what do you do if a brother sins against you? That's that whole passage. And the basic point is, and it's sometimes not understood rightly, I think, is it's an escalating process without a timeline, where you slowly increase more people around them to help them get better. But ultimately, and you can see it in that passage, all you can do is present people with an opportunity to change. You can't make them change. But at the end of the day, if they won't get better or change, then there has to be a boundary that's put up.
And that's Christian to Christian, right?
And that's Christian to Christian, really. Yeah. That's Christian to Christian.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's these different scenarios, right? If it's Christian to non-Christian, if they're, let's say, acting in a way that puts people in jeopardy or puts yourself in jeopardy, it's just like if you have issues with lust, you don't go and minister at a strip club,
No.
right? But maybe we don't have a role in judging people who don't share the same beliefs. That's where we have an opportunity to model what we think that would be a desirable life, a hopeful life, so that they're going to want some of that. I don't know, throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it needs to be said that I think Christians need to accept the reality that if they are not a believer, don't expect them to live their lives by the same set of morals that you do. I mean, why would you expect that? I mean, you want them to because you believe that that's the way that's going to work best for their lives. But
well, yeah,
but
it's like when you watch somebody go and get dinner at McDonald's and you're like, why are you polluting your body like that?
Right.
I mean, of course I do that occasionally. But you can see, well, here's like, wouldn't it be great if you ate like all these vegetables and all, right, and you ate much healthier? It's like the idea that and you wish that they would understand that because it would be better for them and you want the best for them.
Well, and this gets to something I said 2 weeks ago, which is I think a response is better to be grief rather than anger. So instead of being angry at the person who's eating a McDonald's, how about just be sad at the fact that they're polluting their body, And that's the analogy. So okay, you want to go and you want to have sex with all the people you possibly can and do all this stuff, but the reality is that's not going to be healthy for you in the end. And it's your life, it's your choice, but I can see the train wreck that's coming and grieve for you for that.
There's a unfortunately, I don't know if it's a skill or it's a character trait. Let's call it a character trait that is far too uncommon, which is for people to hear, "Hey, that's not the best way to do it," and then to respond accordingly. The whole idea that so many of us we can be told over and over again not to put our hands on the hot stove, but until we do it, it doesn't register. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about my wife so much, is that she's a person who does a great job of going, oh, that's a bad idea? Cool. Not going to do it. Me, I'm like, oh, that is hot. Well, shoot. And I think that's a lot
She's a wise person.
Yeah, she is.
That's wisdom right there. To listen to people is wisdom. Yeah. Which we don't have much in our society right now.
No, it's hard.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, on a personal level, I mean, there's all this, you grieve, you give opportunities, all that sort of stuff. But if you're looking at a societal level, that gets much harder. And this is something that I think probably not in this setting, that I want to be able to have a longer conversation with you, Joe, on how do we as Christians navigate politics? Because being on the right or the left is not a helpful thing. It's just no. And so I don't know where that's a long one, and maybe it's not just you and I, but we got to, because the world is getting a mess. And so I don't know that Christians, and I know some very much disagree with me of this, but I don't think Christians are called to be political movers and shakers. I don't see the first apostles doing that. I just don't. I see them working on an individual level, calling people to Jesus and doing right. And that alone is enough to transform a society, yeah. I think.
Well, I think that actually, and we don't have to delve into it too deeply, but that to me is an example of us imposing justice or judgment upon a world instead of trusting that God's got it taken care of. It's like, oh no, we need to do this. Like,
right.
To me, that's a lot of what that is. And it doesn't matter which side of an argument you're on. Yeah. That you're like, oh no, we need to take care of this.
Right. Because if not, it's never going to get fixed. And then all hope is lost, blah, blah, blah.
Somebody said something, maybe it was you and I talking last week. I'm trying to remember, but like one of the best and the worst things that ever happened to Christianity was it Constantine, whatever, declaring
Constantine, yeah,
declaring that Christianity was the official religion, right? I mean, that's that intersection of faith and politics that was incredibly destructive.
A lot of benefits, but there was a seed of negativity of Christendom. Yeah, it's never left. It's never left. Well, at least Western Christianity. I don't know about the rest of the world, but certainly not Western Christianity.
Yeah. I mean, does anybody really truly have faith if it's imposed upon them? You're going to die if you don't do this. I mean,
yeah, that's the Muslims' viewpoint. Yeah, convert or the sword. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we're not quite that way, but it's still the point of Christendom of, yeah, it's kind of societally imposed by the power of the state, and not good.
So let me kind of follow this a little bit. And, in America, leading up into the 60s, and I think that's when the transition occurred, that mainline church attendance was culturally and it's what you did. Like, what church do you belong to?
Right. Everybody went to church. It was
everybody
assumed.
Went to church. It was a social interaction.
Right.
And then I think that there was a transition out of that in the 60s. And sometimes I wonder if all this sweaty grip that we're trying to hold on to Christianity in America is because we want to culturally go back to that same time. And what can we do to bring that back? And I might argue that did people believe more then, or was it just what you did? I mean, that in my family, it's just what you did. My dad, only believed the Catholic Church was the real church. I mean, at least when I was a kid, he did. He changed, but it was no. We are Irish Catholic, and therefore we go to the Catholic Church.
I certainly think I certainly agree that there's a decent part of that, that people who are culturally Christians, as one commentator put it, moralistic, theistic people who basically, yeah, they have a general, there's the good Lord, whoever that is, and I generally agree with the morals, but it's not necessarily because I actually believe it. Right, I agree, and I think that's dying out in America. I don't think we'll ever get it back myself, but the other side of it, people would say, but they did. I think we were a more moral country back then. I think so. It still had its faults. We could list all others out quite easily, but I think that's what they're longing for. But it's also, as I'm talking out both sides of my mouth here, it reminds me. It also just now reminds me a little bit of the worship wars that you and I have went through, where people they got to have those hymns, because that's comfortable, right? And that's better because that's what I grew up with. And you see people with that. He's like, I want the America I grew up with.
Yeah. And and obviously, well, not obviously, I can say, and I think you can too, that the nostalgia for what was important to us when we were younger, as we see, the later generations moving away from that.
Right.
There's a grief that goes along with that. And I think part of that is that, do you feel like that you are the same person, basically the same soul that you were when you were 13 years old, when, G.I. Joe toys were popular and Transformers and that kind of stuff, and that there's a longing for that, not to be that young again, but that we just haven't, we're effectively
I
the same
think
person.
that's all the case.
Yeah.
I think we need to not, though, go so far into, change is change, but sometimes the past was actually better. And because there's a tendency, I think, since the Enlightenment, the assumption that progress is always better. It's not always better. Sometimes it's worse. I mean, look at my freezer. I have a freezer in my garage that's older than me, and it's still working. Meanwhile, I've gone through 3 refrigerators in the same time. Newer's not always better.
Yeah, I remember my dad bought a tiller, a rototiller. Montgomery Ward rototiller. Remember what Montgomery Ward's was, and he had it for like 20 years. And decided I'm gonna buy a new rototiller. He bought it. He hated the new one. It wasn't as good as the old one. He gave the new one away. Went right back to Montgomery Ward, and that's right. Things aren't necessarily better.
Right.
There's things like, I don't know, the way that we eat, all the processed food and stuff. It's not better. It's just more convenient.
Why is there an epidemic of obesity in America? And there's multiple reasons probably for it. We're not better in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Sorry for the far-ranging conversation.
I know. So, but either way, with all of that said, because that's what this whole book is about. How do we, as a Christian, as a person of faith, how do we deal with the mess that Habakkuk is seeing, and how do we deal with the mess that we're seeing, and among them is this at the core of this is this trusting of faith. How much? Oh, hey, okay. Can we have a? Because we were supposed to talk about trust and all of that. Okay. So I'll put it online, because forgiveness and trust is 2 different things.
Oh, we were talking about this. Was that this week?
That we're supposed to. Yeah.
Okay.
Trust and forgiveness is 2 different things. Okay, because trust has to do with righteousness. If you are rightly relating to someone, then you can trust them. If they are not rightly relating to you, you can't trust them. It's pretty much that simple, right? And so my issue is I was confusing. I have in the past, without reference to the previous one, I had confused God crediting us righteousness with forgiving, because when God does that, he does both. He does 2 things. He removes all of our sins, and so we're no longer going to get punished for what we do. That's forgiveness. But at the same time, in Jesus, we're also credited with righteousness. And so my thinking is like when Jesus forgives, he not only doesn't want to punish you for your sins, but he also trusts you again. Well, that's because he's crediting you righteous. But we don't get to do that. We get to just say, I'm not going to punish you for your sin, forgiveness. But we can't credit people righteousness. They go, okay, fine. You're back to square one again. You're going to have to prove to me that you're worthy of trust by acting rightly for a while. Now, that's what I'm thinking now about this whole thing. Any comments on that?
You're correct.
Now, and how quickly you want to credit them back righteousness? Well, that depends. And you need to give them opportunities.
Yeah. Want is a tough word there because in some cases you may want to trust.
But you can't.
But you can't,
because of wisdom. Wisdom says no.
and hurt. Hurt. It's like saying I love you, but I can't be around you, because you're not good for me.
Right.
It's like what's interesting, and I'll go back to this, is the idea of when we were talking about the difference between Jonah and Habakkuk is the idea of processing, right? Is the idea that I need to kind of work through this stuff. At the beginning, Habakkuk is like, "Arr!" And at the end, he's like, okay. And that's God's tarrying that allows us to kind of work through stuff and go, okay, you're right, God. You're right.
Yes.
And I think that's part of trust as well. Is this like once the person starts to present themselves as safe and trustworthy, that we get there. How long it takes though is depending on processing.
And that's hard. I mean, I do think sometimes that lack of trust, that is continuing to hold on to those hurts, can mean that you need to process some stuff more than you're not letting it go.
Well, it could be that there wasn't actually forgiveness, right?
Right. There may not be.
That you had pointed out before is like if you're not forgiving or you're not trusting, that means that you're looking for the opportunity to whack somebody, right? You're looking for revenge, which
right.
Which is a separate topic, but if you truly forgive somebody, which is really hard to do, then there is a road to trust if you elect to take that road, or if it's appropriate to take that road.
Right. And sometimes, as you pointed out, and we did too, is that sometimes you end up with, okay, I'm no longer going to want to, beat the crap out of you because of what you did to me or to my daughter or whatever it is. But, I don't think it's good for me to see you ever again. And that's okay. And that's okay. You go live your life. I'm going to live my life. That's probably for the better for both of us. That's okay.
Amen.
All right. I brought that up because I think because it has to do with this righteousness thing. I think people sometimes they do want to jump the gun and immediately, well, if you haven't forgiven me, well, if you don't trust me anymore or give me more opportunities to do right, then you haven't forgiven me. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah. Not
necessarily.
And I've been on the bad side of that. And it's a tough place to be. But it's not more difficult than being on the other side where
it's just a different kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions about any of this, send a note to me at the church, or certainly notes in the comments. But either way, looking forward to seeing you guys on Sunday. And until then, God bless.
God bless. Thanks for joining us. And go eat some dinner. It's time.
It's time. Hey.